Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller here with my co-host Kevin David Kridner. Once again, before we dive in, I want to recap three guiding principles that we live by. First, you don't need to be fixed, you need to be known. And we believe that love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity. We're not here to win arguments, but to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We're here to let conversations unfold naturally and follow where authenticity leads us. So pull up a chair, grab a drink, and let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. So, Kevin, last night you sent over this yeah, a bulleted list about humility and suggested that we dive into the topic. And it inspired me to spend a little bit of time. And you suggested defining humility as the desire to learn. And I wanted to explore with you kind of what's the basis for that as a definition, and maybe start there.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Just start there. Uh, the- Before I jump into that, the comments that I've been getting about the podcast is you laugh a lot. Like, all right, fair.
uh, we don't know whether that good, is that
I
bad?
know, I know, yeah. So, I mean, we'll need some comments about that, but yes.
Well, Chesterton
Um,
says that angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. So
oh, there you go. There you go. And what better reference than Chesterton, right?
exactly. There's no better way to start off an episode.
Yeah. Yeah, so humble or humility is the desire to learn. I was talking with a friend yesterday and she brought that up. She had heard it somewhere and I was like, it was like one of those moments where uh like there was just like a lightning flash and then clarity. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe. And so just to like start off, like, you know, the ability or the desire to learn that takes a certain posture. And the posture it takes, just on a very fundamental human level, is I don't know everything. And so that's where my wheels started turning was I don't know everything. And that's a very humble place to be in. And growing up, all the cultural context around it, whether it's church or it's society in general or those kind of things, like humbleness was make to me in a few words was making yourself less than, lessening yourself. And that started to rub me wrong within, like within the last 10 years or so. Like, is that really what it means to be humble? Is that what Jesus is talking about when it means to be when he's talking about being humble? And it's almost like it culminated yesterday in this conversation with this friend. And then like immediately I got in the car and just started like writing notes and like, but what does that tie to this? Does that tie to this? Does that tie to this? And you got the whole like download of everything that popped into my head as I was talking about that.
Well, you got my wheels turning because I started looking up, what was the Hebrew understanding of humility? What's the understanding of pride? And one of the things that surprised me a little bit, or that intrigued me a bit, was that there's this sense of some people define humility as finding our rightful place in God's world, but there's this sense that and I've also heard it said there's a million definitions. It's not about thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less and all these things. But the thing that emerged in some of my amateur digging into this in the last 12 hours was um, humility is about embracing truth and reality, and not just embracing it, but a willingness to embrace it, it seems to me, which can only happen in pride. Proverbs talks a lot about the proud are unwilling to admit their faults, unwilling to learn, and unwilling to accept counsel. And ultimately, it's an unwillingness to, and the proud deny God. It's an unwillingness to embrace reality. So there's some sense in which this whole thing revolves around a willingness to embrace truth in what is real. And you can't, and even learning is that, the desire to learn is that. So the admission of I don't know everything is simply a posture of openness to there is a reality that I don't have a full perspective on. But there's also this understanding that I can learn and embrace it. And it just struck me that it, it, it just struck me in a new light, seeing humility position like this, in light of this idea of embracing reality.
Yeah. 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 Truth is what is. Truth is reality. And then the lie is fantasy. What is not? What should have, could have, would have been. And so in that dynamic, there's the idea that what is before me? What lesson is before me? What does this person have to teach me? What do I need to share with this person that I'm in the conversation with? Like that is humility. It's giving and receiving at the same time. Where in making yourself less, there's almost a supplicant position where you're only receiving. But the truth is, in humility is giving and receiving. It's both. It's knowing and being known. And maybe we just get locked into knowing. If I know, then I'm safe. Then I can stand in this place. I've got my defensive walls put around me. If I know all of these things. But that cuts you off from the being known. Really interesting dynamic.
Well,
As I
there's some.
was
Go ahead.
processing it, I was drawn back to Jesus' statement about children. Unless you're like one of these little ones, you have no part of the kingdom. Like I started thinking about kids. My friend was telling me, another friend I was talking to yesterday, was telling me about he was leading worship at a church, and he and his wife together. And the church is really kind of, I guess he was saying like informal or that kind of thing. So like the kids are kind of like running around in the sanctuary, like during the service, and so he's leading worship, and he sees his daughter. She's in kindergarten, so 5 maybe, run up onto the stage, and then she eats it. She falls, and so his wife picks her up and like takes her over, and like they're singing together, they're leading together, and all of a sudden his wife is gone. Like, oh, what do I do? But in that moment, he was thinking, he's like think of the freedom that she had in that moment to just explore, to be curious. What's up on the stage? My parents are on the stage. I want to be up there. It was just a sense of freedom, and like maybe that's part of what Jesus is talking about. Unless you're curious, like one of these little ones, unless you want to know, unless you ask questions, unless you want to learn, then you have no part in the kingdom. Maybe there's something there.
There's a sense of surrendering dignity and surrendering your ability to. I mean, in many ways, having the answer is what gives you dignity, and surrendering the answer. So there's a few. I could finish that thought, then I just repeat what I said earlier. So there's no point in doing that. Uh, but there's a few threads, a couple threads here that really jumped out in this whole idea, because if this is an embrace of reality and this is about receiving, then there's an admission. Like, let's just talk about humility in terms of our abilities. There's an admission of competence. There's an admission of the boundaries of competence, the which also are boundaries of incompetence. Where do our abilities start and stop? Where does our knowledge start and stop? But there's also this humility is also admitting neuroplasticity, our ability to learn, evolve, adapt, change, and grow. And so it's not just about staying fit. Humility doesn't keep you fixed or locked in. Um, but true humility actually acknowledges that there's opportunity for growth. There's also this other angle that I've run into as well in the context of humility, being childlike, is people sometimes conflate childlikeness with being gullible and being, becoming open to deception. And I think, especially within the church, there's a lot of questions that get silenced because, well, it's outside of the bounds of our understanding. Um, and how do you embrace, shall we say, orthodoxy while remaining open to questions that you, you know um, what does that end up looking like?
That the statement you made, like, how do you embrace orthodoxy while still being able to question? That's a fascinating question. Like, when the writers of the Constitution sat down and decided to put together a document to guide the government, they knew that they didn't know everything. And so what they included in it was the ability to change it, to have it grow. It's the amendment process. And I think that that's wisdom. They knew that they couldn't predict everything that was going to come about. Did their best with what they had, but there's no way they could have predicted what was going to come about. And so, like, it seems like the openness to change, to adjust, is an essential part of what it means to follow God. It's sanctification over time, that path of walking. Like, the system was designed to be dynamic. Has to be, because we live in a dynamic world. But that knowing seems to be static. I know this is how it goes. This is how I'm operating. Very black and white. And what kind of wounding happens in the black and whiteness? What kind of wounding happens in the dynamic nature? There's no escaping wounding. I mean, honestly, either we're going to learn from it or we're going to avoid it at all costs. It brings to mind that the scripture, Jesus says, I'm sending you out amongst like sheep amongst wolves. You need to be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. Talk about a dynamic system. Be innocent as doves, pure of heart, clear motives, all that kind of stuff. And be shrewd, be discerning. So that gullible nature that people think about, like, if you had to choose, would you be shrewd or would you be gullible? And I think only the tension of a life lived under the header of seek me first and my righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Like, my my view, my worldview, my direction, my everything has to be directed at him. I'm going to seek you. And humility in that, like, I don't understand this. This makes zero sense to me. Why is this happening? Maybe I get answers to that. Maybe I don't. But humility is, I guess this is a season for me to learn.
Well, and I think the hardest lessons are sometimes the ones where it's not clear what it is to be learned, and sometimes what you should be learning, and sometimes the only thing that's really clear is what you shouldn't be learning. So,
Right.
I think it's very tempting and suffering in challenging situations to it can be very easy to learn, to learn things like the world isn't safe or I'm not safe in the world. God isn't faithful. Like those are lessons that I think our enemy wants us to learn through those to embrace, and he's the teacher of those. But it's not always clear. So it can be clear during suffering that that's not the conclusion I need to be coming to, but it's not always clear in the middle of a situation, in the middle of chaos. What am I
Oh,
supposed to be making of this?
yeah. Yeah. What do this horrific situation that is before me? Like, what am I supposed to make of this? I mean, like if you can figure that out in the moment, oh man, more power to you. You're better than me. But in
But
that moment, it's that submission, right? That humility, like this hurts. My soul is being cracked open. I don't know what to do, but I trust you. And that doesn't mean the pain goes away. That doesn't mean the situation gets better. It simply just means that I have nothing else, but I'm going to trust in you.
and there's a sense in which it feels like utter mockery to be talking to God, and saying, "I'm open to learn. I want to learn what you have to say," and then not get the lesson.
All right. All right. Yeah, what do you do in that moment? I think my impulse in many situations has been, okay, you're not talking, then I'm going to start fixing. This is what I need to do. I'm not even sure this is what I need to do. This is the thing that comes to mind.
Right?
So I'm going to do that thing. Wow.
Yeah, where it's just a harebrained, let's run in this direction because doing something, going somewhere beats doing nothing. And to be fair, like there is a walking that needs to happen when you're in the middle of this. Um, but maybe discerning between walking and escaping. Um,
Right. Right. Well, maybe there's a wandering in the desert that's absolutely necessary in that process. Maybe there's the 40 years in the desert that is absolutely necessary in that process. And maybe that's where humility is built, is
well,
in the wandering in the desert.
there's two things that happen in the desert. First, if you're wandering in the desert, first of all, you get lost, and it's not possible to learn without getting lost in some degree. A- And I think, I mean, I suppose you gain familiarity with the desert, but one of the things I suppose as well is that you gain familiarity with unfamiliar territory. And I mean, we can think of a lot of examples. Um, the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, Abraham leaving the land of his fathers. There's many different ways in which God, I mean this term pretty loosely, but maybe it's not completely a false term, but God would torment his people until they finally packed up and moved. And then they went into an unfamiliar place and they had to familiarize themselves with this unfamiliar place. I mean, you look at Paul and the wrestling between, his understanding of Judaism and how Christianity fits into that, and what's Christ in this, and like
Mm,
like so maybe the disorientation is a gift. Maybe it's the losing to get us to the point of not having answers, and maybe the I mean it's a simple word shift from wondering versus exploring. And what's the
right.
difference?
Yeah, and do you have space to explore, or do you have to know? Like bringing up that example of Paul, he escapes Damascus, right, in a basket through the wall, and then in Ephesians, he tells us that he spent a period of time in Arabia, like legitimately out in the desert. And who knows how long that was. Some people say it was 3 years, some people say it was less or more, but like he's out in the desert. You think he's wandering, he's exploring, he's coming to see who this Jesus guy actually is. Like, I don't know if you can come to know who Jesus is without that wandering, without a destination. I took I think it was a geology class in college years and years ago. And the guy who was teaching it, he was Saudi Arabian. I forget, he was Middle Eastern. But he talked about the shifting sands in the desert. And he said you could go by a place and you could go by an hour later and it would look completely and utterly different. Like there's sandstorms where you would have tsunamis of sand walls coming at you and completely transforms the landscape. And at least in my experience, it's felt like that a lot of the time. And so maybe it's not that you come to know the desert, but you become more like the environment that you've lived in. You become the desert. There's a humility in that. Like the desert is teaching you lessons. Maybe that's the whole process.
When you think of civilization, civilization is built to protect you from acts of God, for again, lack of a better term.
Right.
You know, um,
Things way
like
beyond our control.
things way beyond your control. So you have nicely structured roads, you have protection from hopefully hurricanes and tornadoes and tsunamis, and at least depending where you're located, you try to build to mitigate the risk of that. You create an interdependent, society, economy, so that nobody's hopefully left stranded. And you contrast that with the desert, where you are very vulnerable to these acts of nature, these forces of nature, wind, sand. You become incredibly subject to the environment. It's often harsh, and I mean, is that then the essence of the lesson?
As you say, that makes me think like the march towards progress. You know, it's really, at least in my mind, an effort to make life easier, more comfortable. And in that sense, it's disconnecting us from the reality of life. Like right now, honestly, the chances that you're going to die are so statistically low in reference to, say, 200 years ago. There's a movie, I'm not suggesting anybody watch it, but I think it's called A Million Ways to Die in the West. And essentially, it's just a farce of like all the numerous ways that you could die living in the Western United States at that time. Like a wagon could roll over you. There could be a random stampede. There's a snake. There's scorpions. There's all that kind of stuff. And you're like, yeah, that's a reality of it. Go back to the 1300s. All of a sudden there's this plague sweeping through Europe, and 33% of the population of Europe dies. and it's essentially a plague carried by fleas that had been on rats. And it's just like boom, bubonic plague. There we go.
Yeah.
And I was reading this book. It was a historical fiction book. It was talking about all the methods that they tried to solve the plague. And this one character's like, hey, maybe we should isolate these people. Maybe we should protect ourselves. Maybe we should do all these things. Like, no, 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 that's not what we do. We need to bleed them. But in that sense, there's this line where, yeah, that's really healthy. Like you look at disease, and the number one thing that will stop diseases from spreading is being mindful of hygiene.
Mm.
Number one.
Yep.
And that's a wonderful thing. And you go back to the commandments, a lot of them are hygiene related commandments, you know? And so like yeah, there's a line where it's okay, like this is being good stewards of our existence, taking care of
Right.
ourselves, taking care of others, that kind of thing. But the push has gone so far away from taking care of yourself to perfecting yourself.
Mhm.
Like, could you imagine if we went back, let's say 200 years into the 1800s, and we started talking to them about cosmetic procedures, plastic surgery? What? Excuse me? And it seems like a very natural process within humanity, within certain environments. So ancient Rome, very successful, very, very wealthy, very opulent, and that kind of stuff. And then the opulence provides this comfort, and this comfort removes the motivation to actually be aware and be connected to reality, and eventually it declines and collapses. Again, a lack of humility. Like I have comforted myself so much that I don't have to deal with that reality.
I mean, underneath all of a lot of this is there nothing significant enough? Is there nothing I can pour myself into that's significant enough that's worth my discomfort? Because I mean, I look around. Isn't that part of it's not natural for humans to embrace discomfort, but we will embrace it for a higher cause of some kind. E-
Hmm.
Even if that higher cause is just some future version of ourselves,
Right.
even if it's completely self-seeking,
Hmm. Even if it's vanity.
even if it's vanity. So I think one of the questions too is so we've talked in previous episodes about purpose being union, but is there no but what's the fray that we should throw ourselves into?
What's the fray? Big picture. And I think there could be circumstantial individual frays that God is leading us into. But I think big picture, the fray that he's calling us to throw ourselves into is a we endeavor. What brings about we? What brings about union? It's like I remember when I first started running a number of years ago. I was overweight, high blood pressure, all that kind of stuff. And I started running for me, lose weight, get the blood pressure under control, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's an objectively bad thing. But if it stuck on me for the entirety of that process, I wouldn't have kept with it. I found in running that it was a meditative experience. I learned so much in that. It was a meditative experience where when I was running, I could talk to God and I could hear him more clearly. And there was a we that started to develop between he and I. And then also I started to think like, oh, with me being more in shape, healthier, that that gives me the ability to go out and do things and be with people and uh you know invite people into that space. I got to meet new people. Like there was a big we that happened being at these massive like races and talking to people while I was there, that kind of thing. Or even within like my work, encouraging clients to, get out, exercise, walk, go for a run, that kind of thing. Not solely because it's going to make you healthier, but to step into that place where there's potentially a we.
Mm.
And so that was a circumstantial individual one, but that we led to a greater we.
Yeah.
Like I have a buddy who's really into jujitsu, and he started training jujitsu because a girl he was dating years ago was into it. So he started that as a we and really loved it. And then he went to the same gym and got to know those people there and developed a we there, and then started going to tournaments and developed a we there. And like there was all this development of we that happened in the midst of it. And I think we have our circumstantial we's, if they're done the right way, lead to a larger we. I just said we so much in that discussion. But it's about union, about we, about relationship, about connection,
Yeah.
about a willingness to learn. And he says this is fascinating. He's like, you're never going to perfect jujitsu. He's like, you're just not going to perfect it. He goes, because you can practice all the forms and all the techniques and all that kind of stuff, and then the person you're rolling with could make a different decision. And then you have to adjust in that. And so he's like, it's this continual wrestling with it's a very desert experience. And that's what he loves about it. And he works as like a project manager for a construction company. He's like, I could not, and he started that job after getting involved in jujitsu. He goes, I could not do the job I do now if I hadn't have had that training in jujitsu. Because the project management that I do, there is always something shifting, always something changing. Materials don't arrive. Somebody's late. Somebody does the wrong process. He's like, I have to learn to roll with it. And jujitsu gave him that mindset that to roll with whatever comes in front of you. Like to me, that's a sacrament. That's another thing that like is blowing my mind recently is the concept of a sacrament. Like the tangible, realistic thing in my hands that is a doorway to the eternal. And that was a sacrament for him. It was a tangible, real life, lived experience that was a doorway into the conversation God wanted to have with him. And to me, like that's humility. That's learning. That's beautiful. The desert experience.
I can't remember if I talked about this on the podcast or not, but I did some, I don't think I did, but for folks who don't know, I started writing code when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I did some interesting, I did some research because I was curious. I was like, what's the impact of a kid doing something like that at such a young age? Like, there's screen time, there's all this other type of stuff. And what I found was actually pretty logical. It was that if you do that as a kid, you're going to develop great logic, improve critical thinking and those types of things. And you're also going to find yourself falling short on social skills because, you're not developing those.
Right.
Very logical response. Um, the fascinating thing in what you're describing here is that it's that experience has given me an ability to spot patterns, repeatable patterns in what a lot of people would identify as chaos. Um, but it's also given me this, like it's in some sense given me this false foundation for life in which there's a deep part of my psyche that expects life to be predictable and controllable because that's exactly the environment that you're in. And if something goes sideways, you can identify the issue and correct it and prevent it from happening again. Um, it's very much a closed, stable system. Um, and but it's it's at its strengths, but it's also come with its weaknesses. It's interesting to think about some of these other types of experiences that intentionally create alternative ways of thinking about the world.
Yeah. What was that experience like for you? 8 or 9 years old, writing code. Like, and then, what was that experience like for you?
I mean, it was. I mean, there's parts of it that, in some ways, it like it was this fascinating venture into almost like an alternate universe. Because there's so much imagination that's accessible, um, so much creative output that can be had. I think I mean just one silly example. A friend of mine came to visit when I was I don't know, I was maybe 12 years old, something like that, and we created a an AA Milne themed text editor, and
Mm.
you toggle between different modes. So Tigger would make the window jump across the screen. Um, Winnie the Pooh mode would cause certain keys to repeat 5 times, and sometimes you had to hit it 5 times to get a keystroke in. Christopher Robin would recite poetry while you typed, and all these other types of things. So there was this, you know, these so it really unlocked layers of creativity for myself. But as as I reflected back, it's like it's almost like the rest of the world became more confusing. Um, like uh, I, I don't know if it was I don't know what all contributed to it. I think some of it was just the matter of being in a messy environment. Um, but but also compounded by not spending enough time around people and in those messy environments to learn to make sense of what the underlying structure, if any, there is in those types of environments. So
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, you found a space where you felt like you belonged.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. For me, that was books. Like in a very chaotic, messy environment, didn't make sense. Like I could find a place in a book. I could invest myself in a story. I could live in that world for a time. Like there was, I don't know if I've told this story before. I may have. Did I tell about my brother's car accident?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like that, and add on to that was like afterwards, what I do remember is like I just went deep into books. And I remember reading two in particular, Treasure Island and then The Hobbit. And I can't tell you how many times I read those back to back, maybe alternating, maybe finish it, go back to the beginning. And I look back now and it was like that world was safe for me because the world outside was not. And I found this space where I could be safe. And I wonder if that's a child's introduction into the reality of the world. And this place is not safe for me. And so I find a way to make it safe. For a lot of people that I know, especially in their late 20s, early 30s, mid to late 20s, video games are that place and online communities. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she was saying how she had flown back east to go to a wedding, and it was people who she had never met in person but knew via online, whether it was work or it was like a gaming community. And she was so nervous going because what's it going to be like? This is the world's big, scary, scary place. And she went, had a fabulous time, loved it. And it was a really profound experience for her that the real world with people in it, like interacting face to face, wasn't as dangerous or scary as it used to be. And I wonder how much all of us are doing it are performing a dynamic that's similar to that, whether it's with our work communities or it's with our family communities or it's an online community or whatever. Like we find our people and we just latch onto that because it's safe.
That's fascinating. I mean, jumping back to making sense of that experience, I actually, I mean, there were other safe things for me. There were certain types of, especially in a school context, certain things that I would specifically compete for, because I knew I could win. I remember one was we did like this readathon where we were competing on, well, we weren't actually competing. It was just a challenge to raise money for, and I remember within, I was like in the, I want to say, I think it was in the fourth grade or something. And I think I read pretty close to 10,000 pages in a month. Um, and, and so I can identify with reading and books as being a safe space as well. Um, I think, but it was also safety and certain levels of attainable achievements that I found safety in. Um, and some of my, this is this sounds utterly ridiculous when you say it, but some of the most devastating things from high school were the classes where I got B's instead of A's. Um,
Right.
and flip side, I should be grateful because I had a lot of friends who would have been happy with B's in some of their classes. And
Hmm.
I couldn't see past that. It was a terrible stain on my who I was.
Right.
And I mean, the point being, so making sense of these places where we draw on safety. How much of the safety is a reflection of um, who we are as people, who God has created us to be? Like, there's something about puzzles, about problem solving, about learning, about creative worlds. In your case, like that pulls, there's an intrigue with some of these safe places, but there can also be self-protection in that.
Right. Right. Hmm. I it makes me think when I'm really in my head, when I'm really overwhelmed, life is too much, thoughts are too much, feelings are too much. I will sit down with pen and paper and I'll just start writing. And inevitably, what comes out is poetry of some sort.
Yep.
And that's my way to process what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And inevitably, at the end of that process, it may take an hour, it may take 10 minutes, it may take 2 days. But at the end of that process, I've expressed what it is that I need to express. And I've done that my whole life. There's a flip. Like sometimes it's very analytical. It's very A plus B equals C. Um, I struggle to say logical because there's a ton of emotion in it. But there is logic there as well. And then sometimes it's poetry. Like when I've reached the place that I can't understand this, I can't figure this out, this makes no sense to me, then immediately it goes to poetry. Like, I don't know, late last week, early this week, um, just feeling a ton and just couldn't make heads nor tails of it. And so I sat down and started writing, and what came out was this poem that I called Everlasting Rain. And it's about baptism, and it's about the lament that God has over how we operate in this world. And it came out very like Walt Whitman-esque, like just epic with, like four movements within it and that kind of thing. And it was just like, this is what I'm feeling right now. And when I wrote the last word, I was like, okay, that's enough. I'm done. And I wonder if there's just something about how God designed us in that sense of the groanings that the spirit, the internal groanings that the spirit understands, that whether it's lyric or it's prose or it's poetry or whatever it is, like that's a way we can communicate it. And it sidesteps, it goes around the ego, it goes around the logic, it goes around the mind, goes around all of that. And it's just like, no, this is here where I'm at. And that's become a safe space to me. But unlike before, where it was I would retreat into books looking for answers, this is I'm just expressing what's in here. I'm putting it out there. And sometimes I share that, sometimes I don't. I mean, looking at my journal cabinet, it's a 6 foot tall cabinet with 7 shelves, and it's packed with journals from over the years. Like that's how I've always been able to process it. And I think there's a desire to be known in there. And for the longest time, I wouldn't share any of it. Like there's so many things that are in those journals that has never been shared with anybody. And yet, over the last probably 5 years, I've been curious to go back and to put it onto paper and to put it out into the world and say, here, these are my thoughts. And I think that that's a very humbling experience. It's a very, here's me, here are my thoughts, here's what I've experienced. Does it resonate with you? Do you feel this? Am I the only one? And sometimes it's been like, no, you're the only one. Like, okay, I gotcha.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay. And sometimes it's been even just like the smallest comment, like, hey, man, this really impacted me. This line here, or I really resonate with that. Like, it's the automatic we. Oh, I'm not alone. Okay. Okay. Like when I first started writing online, one guy, his name's John, lives in Massachusetts. Wouldn't know him from Adam if I saw him on the street. But he was consistently highlighting, commenting, engaging with what I was writing. So thank you, John, if you're listening to this, because that gave me courage to go forward. Like, John's hearing it. It's affecting one person. And not that it's changing his life or anything like that, but he's engaging with it. And that gave me the courage to continue to do it. And I think from the messy environment, from the chaos, when it was internal and living in the world of books, to be able to externalize, to write, to communicate what it is that I'm thinking or feeling, it's powerful. It's powerful.
Yeah. So if you want to pull this back a layer deeper, I
Yes,
think
please.
one of the things that I've wrestled with is that I mean, one of my mentors encourages people to intentionally create space in their lives for this type of thing. But the problem is there's very little definition for what this type of thing is. So in your case, your expression tends to be recorded, written, as in written in words,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's also appropriate to realize because I've paid attention to me, like what are the things that help me process? Um, and sometimes it's almost more about what are my meditative actions? So some of the ones for me are taking walks, conversations on the phone while I'm talking, conversations with ChatGPT while I'm walking. These are not ChatGPT is not a substitute for real people. Don't get me wrong, whatever. Um, but
You got to throw that caveat out there.
my brain works better when my mouth is moving. And so that's one element. For me, it's also sometimes like literally building little widgets, tools, scripts, systems, like building something like that is another thing. I've recently gotten into Sudoku puzzles and like there's something about that process that's really sometimes frustrating, but also calming for me as well. So there's part of it in which it feels like there's a certain set of activities that calm our nervous system in whatever for whatever reason. And that is, you know, that's almost like opening the doorway for expression. Sometimes, and sometimes the expression itself is that. But then there's also the artistic expression that comes out of that. And so I think of life as the canvas. And so for a certain number of people, for certain people, it's words on a page. For some people, it's music that's being played. For some people, or songs being written, or it's paintings being painted. It's systems being built. But I also think it's also um, sometimes it's also live improv. It's
Mm,
it's the random the conversation with the total stranger. Um, the chat with the barista, the whatever the thing might be, this ephemeral live moment that is not captured but disappears into the ether in some capacity. That
right.
can be an art form of expression of yourself that I think can be every bit as powerful as putting words on a page. It
Yeah.
performance on a stage, if that's your thing. I got to be on a stage last week and had a friend of mine help author the script and take people through the roller coaster of a great talk. Um,
Mm,
and that experience to me is an art form. It's an expression of who I am. So I think I, I, I think when you understand that, when you can broaden your concept of what is art, what is expression, um, it can take the pressure off of, okay, well, I need to journal like Kevin does.
right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It does really. Yeah. And there are certain behaviors that I exhibit that like for the longest time were so curious to me. Like, why are you drawn to this? And then as I sit here now, it like makes total sense. Like cryptography. I'm utterly fascinated by cryptography. Yeah, like old like Civil War documents that were written in code. and like going through and going looking at the patterns and finding the patterns like that soothes my nervous system, like seeing the pattern in the structure. Like a buddy of mine, he's passed away since, but he, like a family heirloom, was this box of letters that were written during the Civil War, and it was one of his uncles way back was writing letters home. And he goes, look at these letters, like, because he knows I love history and that kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so I look at one of them, and he was involved in the Battle of Atlanta, and he's writing home, but it's all in prose. And I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. You're in the middle of a war zone, fighting for your country's life, and you know you're losing, and you have the mindfulness to write this letter home in prose. And as I read it, certain patterns started to emerge, certain phrases being repeated, certain punctuation, that kind of thing. And I was like, this is a code. And I spent years poring over that letter, trying to discern the code and never discerned the code. I don't know what was coded, but I saw the patterns and I was like, that soothed my nervous system. That was something I could put myself into. And that was something that I knew that was good for me at that time. And I wonder if some of the things that we get involved in that we may feel a little bit of shame about, like if we understand them from a different perspective, we could go, oh no, this is very soothing to me. Like it's okay. Like I have a lot of clients who are gamers and love those online communities, and they feel shame around it. They're into Dungeons and Dragons, they're into Final Fantasy, video game, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, they start talking to me about the experience there and the connection with people online and the lessons they're learning in the midst of it. And I was like, why do you feel shame about this? Like, this is knowing yourself deeper and knowing other people deeper. Like, this is a connecting experience for you. Oh, because I'm just inside playing video games. Okay, we can get some fresh air, and that would be a great thing. Objectively true. But why are we discounting this thing? Another one of my buddies, like bonsai trees, like loves them, loves curating, and I don't know what you call it, curating it, shaping it, all that kind of stuff. And when winter, they stay outside during summer, spring and summer. Then when winter comes, he brings them inside, and there's this whole process to take care of them. And like he felt a lot of shame about that. It's like it's a meditative process for you. Why are you feeling shame about this?
Right.
Because I'm a PhD and I work in biotech and I should be all focused on that. Like, imagine the pressure of that. You're a PhD working in biotech. Like, that's pressurized. How are you going to release that pressure? Bonsai trees.
I can't think of a much better way. I mean, there's a lot of really worse ways to release pressure from working in
Right.
biotech than that. Like,
Right.
seriously.
Like, have you ever seen The Karate Kid? It seemed to work really well for Mr. Miyagi.
Exactly.
Seemed to be a
I've
super peaceful dude.
I have a friend of mine who he was the CMO for for big tech companies in Silicon Valley, and the stress ended up coming to him, which is why he moved into our area. Um, and one of the things that we were on the road to a conference together one time. You guys started talking about gardening because gardening is his meditative experience, and he was just talking about how many things about the kingdom, like you could sit down and have an interview with him, or like you could spend probably a day talking to him about all the things about gardening and how gardening is a parallel for life, a parallel for the kingdom, and all of these types of things. And it's for him, that's his meditative act. But it's also the place where these lessons come alive. And I think one of the things I think, like this is this is maybe your pathway through the underbrush back to the original topic, which is
We knew we'd
maybe,
get there eventually.
yeah, well, so some way the dots will connect. But But maybe part of the humility, part of the challenge that we face is that when we're not around other people who are interested in receiving from us, we never unpack the lessons from those meditative experiences. And to your point, like there's so much shame around, like what's the point? Why cryptography and Sudoku and bonsai trees and like all these like these are such weird things. Like what is that? What relevance does that have to the rest of the world? But if but it's actually other people's curiosity. And I know some of my biggest ahas about some of my biggest ahas around systems thinking came from curious conversations from people completely outside of my realm of experience asking me about things.
Yeah.
And and suddenly these lessons started to ignite.
Yeah. 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 And maybe these experiences, Sudoku, cryptography, bonsai trees, running, whatever it is, maybe this is developing the we between the spirit in us, the Trinity in us. And in that meditative place, then we can go out and develop the we outside of that. Maybe that humility, like in that place of we with the Trinity, there's such a humility that is developed there. And maybe in that place, now we're ready to go. Like it just brings to mind like John the Baptist living out in the desert, wearing camel skins and eating locusts, like, and he spent years out there. Who knows how long? I mean, he's a little bit older than Jesus, less than a year older than Jesus. So maybe in his late 20s, early 30s. So how long has he spent out in the desert? Decades. And then, like, in that place of we with the Trinity, then he can come in and he can start speaking, completely and utterly robbed of his own self image, robbed, disabused of his own self image, his own ego. And then it can just be about we. I wonder if the busyness, the chaotic nature of our world is the enemy's attempt to keep us from that we, from that silence and that solitude. And maybe that's what's so dangerous about making religion part of the state is it's just a cog within the same machine and I'm just running in that and it takes away the we developed in silence and solitude with the Trinity. And when we're robbed of that, then we're robbed of this as well. Maybe these experiences like we're talking about are these meditative experiences are a desert in and of themselves where he can speak tenderly to us.
I have a friend of mine who's um for him he took up the hobby of knitting, which I was curious. And I asked him why, and he's like, "Well, you have the repetitive motion of your hands. You're doing something with your hands. You have this pattern. You get to actually create things. You have something on the tail end of that." And he's like, "It's way better than sitting and fidgeting with your phone, like scrolling on your phone and doing things like that," which I found absolutely fascinating. So if the enemy's goal is distraction, if it's chaos, there's some people who will say that our mandate to take dominion in some capacity is about bringing order to rightful order to chaos, and 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 so is it true then that math, word searches, knitting, like could it be that these are actually in some sense spiritual warfare, like driving out the
Mm,
chaos from our lives, creating
mm.
pockets and sanctuary of order and peace within our worlds, so that as we move into that, we have the ability to hear from him and to silence the voice of the enemy, so that we can hear. Um,
Mm. There's this guy I recently met, and sitting in this kind of communal space. And I had met him here or there, said hi. Um, and he approaches me. This is, I don't know, maybe about a month ago. He approaches me. He goes, "Hey, you want to see something?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." I was totally in my head at that point. And he goes, "I want to show you this DNA sequence of a triceratops." And I was like, "I'm fascinated." Yes, let me see that. And he goes,
exactly.
here's the fascinating thing. He's like, there's bits of human DNA sequence within the Triceratop DNA. He's like, how did that get there? And I'm probably butchering the story, but that's the gist I took from it. And I'm like, fascinating. I have no idea. Tell me. So he pulls out his computer and he pulls out this list of what just to me looks like code, but it's all ATGC. It's all DNA code, kind of thing. And he's like, see this piece right here? That's human DNA. See this right here? This, and I was like, what? The guy just randomly approaches me and is like, hey, check this out. And I'm like, fascinated. No, I could have been like, who's this weird guy talking about Triceratop DNA? And been like, yeah, okay, buddy, that's great. But it was just like, no, like, I don't know anything about this. And I want to learn something from you. So please keep going. And he legitimately sat there, I would probably say like 45 minutes, showing me things and talking to me about it. And he was like 10 minutes late to his next meeting. It hit him like, he goes, "Oh, I'm late. I got to go." That was our entire interaction. Thanks for sharing that with me. Boom, he's gone. Like maybe that to him is that meditative experience, that bringing order to chaos in a very small way that he can. And like, just like wonderful, just beautiful. Yeah, I mean, to your point, like maybe that's spiritual warfare is these little things that are bringing order to chaos. It reminds me of the of Jesus in the boat asleep, and the storm kicks up, and it's raging, and they're losing their minds. We're gonna die. We're gonna drown. Don't you care? And then their eyes are on him, and they're listening to him, and then the peace comes. Like maybe the sacrament of
Right.
Sudoku or gardening or running or whatever it is that works for you.
That's right. And that was a thread that had occurred to me that I'm grateful that you resurfaced because it completely slipped my mind. But the idea of these as sacraments, as portals or gateways or windows or whatever you want to call them, not to make it super weird, just like entry points into the eternal, connecting points.
Yeah, yeah. I have another buddy who lives out in Tennessee, and apparently there's like in Tennessee there's a lot of caves underground, like in rivers underground, and you can actually rappel into these and then explore and that kind of thing. I'm like, fascinating. So he was telling me a story about how he rappelled into this cave. It was like 300 feet down a few weeks ago. And like he had this experience where like he rappels through darkness down like 300 feet. And then he comes into this big opening. He's like, looks like an oasis and a beach. And like I'm sitting on the beach and I can hear the water running and I don't know where it's coming from. And so I get curious and I start exploring where it's coming from. And his buddy is going off on this thing and they're tied to each other so they don't get lost. And like this whole thing. And at the end of that, he's like, it was so peaceful.
Mm,
Maybe that was a sacrament for him. It was an experience of the divine, of God, of the Trinity in the midst of this. And so like he's like, I'm gonna find more caves and I'm gonna explore more caves because that's what that's where I felt that.
yeah.
And this guy a year ago just drinking too much, smoking too much weed, like all that kind of stuff, just a loneliness, kind of thing. And once he started climbing, he started with rock climbing, and then he's rappelling. I guess they call it caving, that kind of thing. He's like, I don't have any desire for any of those things anymore.
Wow.
Develop a friendship, a friend group around this process. Like there's a girl within the group that he's interested in, like there's all these things that are wonderful that are happening, and so it's just like the things we discount. Like maybe these are the doorways to these experiences of the all-consuming fire of the presence of God. Like maybe these are doorways that bring us into. And maybe some of the other behaviors are numbing the fact that I'm not walking through that doorway. I'm not experiencing that sacrament, whatever it is.
Right. Well, how much do we end up? I love of all my. If I had to choose a favorite author, I would have to hands down choose Chesterton. He's
No,
a favorite of mine for forever. So apologies to all you listeners who aren't familiar with his work. Um, but I'm
you should
fascinated.
be.
You should be. We're introducing you in bite-sized pieces. So,
Yeah.
I mean, because how much of it do we try to take sacraments then and make them our lives? Like, is that an appropriate
Yes.
venture? And then I also have to think about Chesterton's book, The Man Who Was Thursday, and
Yes.
how many times is like even with the caves, like the caves are great, and if that's a consistent place, as long as you're consistently finding him in those sacraments, pursue that, like enjoy those sacraments. But there are
Hmm.
also times when he is this, when without ruining the story, but he's this undercover anarchist who just wants to be chased by the people, and we go on this wild goose chase, really, to
Hmm.
find these places of peace, and that's how he tricks us into, if you want to call it that, into following him into these crazy places. What does that what does that dance look like?
Mm. I think it looks like feeling stuck. Like when the cave becomes the thing rather than an entrance to the thing. I think we're stuck looking for the thing over and so it's a drug essentially. I
Mhm.
had this, I experienced this. It was so different than my normal experience. I want more of that. And so I just do more and more and more. But it was never about the cave.
Right.
It was never about the bottle. It was about the doorway that it's allowing you to enter into the infinite landscape of God and who he is. Like in I think it's the last battle in the Chronicles of Narnia. Like come higher up, come deeper in. Like the invitation is always higher up and deeper in. And that
Mhm.
higher up and deeper in is infinite.
Yeah.
It's God. It's infinite. And so if I get stuck on the thing, well, like look at relationships. If I see my partner as the thing, as the culmination of everything, then eventually I'm gonna become displeased with the thing because
Right.
that relationship is a sacrament. It's a doorway into the eternal. It's the closest tangible thing we have to what our relationship with God will look like, but it's a doorway, not the fulfillment of it.
That's a really, really powerful distinction. And it's also one of the biggest arguments if you want to highlight the war between Protestantism and Catholicism. It's like you guys are worshiping basically idols because you have these images of these saints. That's the Protestant argument, and the Catholic argument is these are our brothers and sisters in the faith who've gone before us, and they're pointing us to him, to the eternal. At least, and this is broad brushstrokes, and I'm again not an expert here. I'm just saying, like
We don't want to start a holy war here.
we don't want to start a holy war here, but how many times? I mean, but then firmly landing at, having been deeply entrenched in the Protestant side, it's like how many times do we cast fingers at other people of you have taken the sacrament and you have made it an idol, and but wait, what about the sacraments that I've partaken of, and then I have made it an idol instead of allowing ourselves to be pointed continually back to him. So, I mean, I think that's a really powerful. Um, I think you said it very well.
Yeah, and others, other sacraments, baptism.
Hmm?
If that one thing is your one time and you're cleansed, then it's not a doorway. That
Right,
thing has become the eternal.
right.
But what if I see, like uh, John says in First John 5:8, there's three things in agreement: the water, the blood, and the spirit. These things are all testifying to who God
Mhm.
is. What if that baptism is a doorway through which I experience the eternal? I experience God. So what if I'm continually baptizing? Yes, you have the sacrament, which is that event that happens that I'm baptized. Okay, cool. But it's a doorway into a process of eternal baptism, eternal cleansing. And what if I see the blood as a one-time deal? I pray the prayer, I've done the thing, and now I'm good. That that thing becomes the eternal. But
Yeah,
what if it's a continual? That's the doorway into the life that is a continual acknowledgement and humility and gratitude for what Jesus came to show us. And I live my life in devotion to Jesus, not the blood. That's the sacrament. That's the event. And that's incalculably wonderful.
right.
But if I stop there, then it becomes all about me. If it's a continue, if that's a doorway into this relationship with who Jesus is, then it's infinite. And there's no amount of walking or running or whatever of coming higher and deeper that is ever going to satisfy that.
Right.
It's an eternal curiosity, an eternal wanting to learn, an eternal humility, if you will, to bring it back around.
Well, and to your point of baptism, Paul talks very clearly about the idea of being immersed into Christ, i.e., union. I mean, it is a continual losing ourselves in some context, by some definition, in Him. Like it's allowing Him to be the all-encompassing reality. It's super
And
fascinating. So,
that experience of the spirit too, just to round it out with the third
mhm,
one.
yeah,
This is in your bones. This is in your marrow. This is in your DNA. This is guiding you towards the water, towards the blood, towards union continually. And yet, if I see it as this is something that I can access that will solve my problems and make me comfortable circumstantially, I'm missing the whole point.
right.
I'm missing the whole point.
Well, and even just to pick on theology, like if we view even getting caught in the argument of is the Spirit given when you first believe, or is there a secondary experience, or all of those things can blind us to the reality that, well, it's really not. I mean, by whatever means you get into the water, what matters is being in the water. And
Right.
what matters is having having that the breath of life breathing in you and through you, and and yielding to the wind to blow where it will. And like that's a very simple example of pointing to a single experience and freezing the entire frame around that rather than the
Yeah.
life that we get ushered into.
Right. It strikes me. I had this experience. I was in Namibia years ago, maybe 20, 25 years ago, and we were working with this guy. He wanted to prepare his land for planting seed. Really like community garden kind of thing. Feed the people in the community via the crops that were grown there. It's like, awesome, let's do it. And so we're out there and we've got blisters and we've got shovels and rakes and hoes and all that kind of stuff, all by hand. There was no machinery here whatsoever. And at a certain point, um, he was like, okay, we've cut it down, we've cleared all this, now we need to burn it. And we're gonna burn it, till up the soil. Okay, let's do it. And so I'm standing there just outside of the area watching, and they light the fire, and it just starts burning. And I felt this wind come up and started to swirl around. And that moment, I was like, this is the spirit. This is a tangible experience of the spirit in this moment. And there was such complete and utter peace in the midst of that. No, I could go searching for that experience over and over and over again. But that was the doorway. That was him saying, I'm here. Come with me. Let's go higher and deeper. And to me, like it's such a profound thing of I could go searching for that experience at that time with that environment, or I could see it as a doorway that is an invitation to all that he is and all that he wants to do and all that he is leading towards and growing and shaping and refining and correcting and all these kinds of things. And to be honest, for a number of years, I was searching for that. Like every time I felt a bit of wind, like, is that you? And it was so tied to that circumstance rather than this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. And so I think we get lost in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's a drive for those for us, the physical, tangible part of ourselves, the very human, the sarks, the whatever you want to describe it, wants to anchor to physical experiences. And
Yeah.
our spirit anchors to eternal truths.
Hmm.
And I think this is part of the challenge that we live in being mortal beings um with eternal spirits. Like there's this tension between those two worlds. And
Yeah.
sometimes we lock into one, not the other. Well, I'm disappointed because I'm disappointed in you, Kevin. Um,
There's a long line.
it's a long line. Get in line, he says. You're number 9,743.
Right?
We'll
That's a
hear your
conservative
complaint
estimate.
we'll hear your complaint in 10 years from now.
Hmm.
So, but no, I mean, you had four different elements around humility, and we didn't get a chance to dive into those.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time we'll leave it
We'll
as a
see which
teaser.
way the wind blows.
We'll see which way the wind blows.
Oh man, so good.
It's so good. Well, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just wrestle with it. Wrestle with the idea of that definition of humility, like the desire to learn, and see what pops up in you as you wrestle with the desire to learn as being the definition of humility.
Yeah. And I think much of this conversation, if I want to try to tie the themes together, much of this conversation around these meditative acts, um, the sacraments, a lot of these are around posturing yourself into a position of openness to learn, to
Yeah.
to connect with the eternal. And I think that's that's where that's like drawing a clear line between humility as the desire to learn. I feel like to me, it's almost like maybe not even step one, maybe it's just step zero of the
Yeah.
desire to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of the of wisdom. So uh,
I read
that's a
that somewhere once.
read that somewhere once. All right. Well, to those of you guys listening, thanks again. We count it an honor that you go along this journey with us, and always love to hear from us, hear from you guys. Just to note that there's a lot of we're putting a lot more of our content out on Substack, and so if you made it to this point and you're a reader and you want other ways to consume our content, go ahead and go to pubinthedesert.com, hit the Substack link. You can get these by email if you want. Leave comments on the platform. Let us know what you think. We're eager to engage in conversation with you guys. And thanks again. And until next time,
Till next time.
thanks, Kevin.